So I felt compelled to bring up these articles because I've been hearing a lot of people complaining about how they don't want to be married anymore. And it's on both sides. There's men and women either complaining about having a difficult marriage, or they're saying they do not want to be married anymore, or they don't even like their spouses. And so I've been seeing a lot of more videos coming up like that. And I've been hearing a lot of politics stating that because of the women's rights being taken away, abortion rights, and then some other issues that are coming up, that also might contribute as to why some people are no longer as excited about the union of marriage. So I found more and more articles coming out about the pros and the cons of marriage, and here's 17. And this is recent. This is August 24, 2025. So this is by a Sonia Schwartz. As with most big decisions in life, there are pros and cons, and marriage is no exception. It doesn't matter whether you've always dreamed of being married or a married couple, or you hate the idea. Marriage can have both advantages and disadvantages. There are some couples that see marriage as the next natural step in their relationship. However, for others, marriage is an outdated institution and has no place in modern society. Nevertheless, it really isn't important what society or other couples think about getting married. If you are facing the momentous decision of whether to get married or not, it might help to examine the pros and the cons of marriage. Let's start with the benefits of marriage. What are some of the benefits of getting married? So you see what looks like a happy couple here, and they're getting married. So number one, it gives you security. Having a piece of paper that legally binds you to one other person is incredibly comforting. And when you are a person's husband or wife, you have a level of commitment that other couples don't have. This can be especially important for couples who want to have kids. A married couple has much more security, both financial and emotional, than a boyfriend and a girlfriend who are simply living together. So number two, it is financially beneficial. Married couples, they get certain tax breaks that unwed couples do not. So in fact, many people marry because they can significantly reduce their tax bills. Married couples may also receive and share health insurance benefits that two people who are living together are not entitled to. Another important issue to raise is that spouses do not pay inheritance tax when their married partner dies. However, even if unmarried couples are named in one another's wills, they still have to pay in order to transfer inheritance. Number three, you get automatic rights. When you are married, you get automatic rights as a husband or a wife. For instance, as a surviving spouse, you are entitled to the Social Security benefits. Even if you divorce, you have more rights if you were married than if you were just living together. You also get automatic rights for hospital visits and medical decisions. So, and don't forget the most important married right, which is upon the death of the spouse. Inheritance is automatically given to the spouse that's living. Number four, it provides a companionship. So humans are social creatures. We don't like to be on our own for long periods of time, of course. So however, having someone who is always there is a great comfort to us. But knowing that they are there because they married you is like an extra layer of comfort. Marriage benefits people who don't like being on their own. So number 5, it eases emotional burden. So when you're a married couple, you know that you're in it for the long haul. So this provides you a stable partner to share your problems with, and you know that they are not just going to walk out on you after any difficulties. You have both made vows to one another, and you have promised to stick around for better or for worse. You are a team dedicated to your future together. It is you against the world. It is number 6, it's better for the kids or the children. When you're a married couple, you are giving your children a dependable foundation from which they can blossom and grow. So marriage gives kids, two parents that love them and are invested in their well-being. It can also provide two different role models for them. In fact, research suggests that children of parents that marry and stay married live longer and happy lives. This is due to several reasons. So children of divorced or single parents may be financially worse off, or they may or might experience a weakened relationship from either parent or grandparents. They could even face increased aggression from parents. Number 7, married people are healthier. As children who live with married parents are better off, it seems that being married affords a higher level of health. Married couples are less depressed than their single or divorced friends. They report experiencing less physical or mental stress. As a result, their level of stress hormone cortisol is much lower. This means they are at less risk of developing certain debilitating ailments such as heart disease or strokes. They are also at less risk of contracting sexually transmitted diseases. So couples who are married live longer. Number 8, marriage is good for men. Forget all the indoor jokes that men make about their wives. Statistics show that married men are healthier than men who are never married. In fact, men who marry live longer than those who don't. Moreover, the longer a man is married, the greater his survival rate. There are many reasons attributed to the benefits of marriage to men. But one major cause is thought to be how the death of the spouse affects the different genders. Women tend to live longer than men, so they are far more likely to lose their husbands. Men do not fare well after the death of a spouse. Even when their wife is hospitalized, men neglect their nutrition and their health. Number 9, marriage makes us happier. As well as being healthier, marriage seems to up our happiness levels too. So on average, 40% of married people report feeling happy compared to just 22% of those who have never married. Researchers looked into the dip of levels of happiness that occurred naturally in middle age. Studies suggest that we're happiest in our youth, and this drops in the middle age, then picks up again as we get older. However, for married couples, this drop in happiness is not as severe as unmarried couples. So this suggests that marriage affords a level of support during difficult times. So now, that's all the good things that they say about being married. What are the cons and the disadvantages of being married? So what are some of the disadvantages? Well, let's get into some of it, and we'll get into even more of it You are stuck with the same person forever. Some people believe that humans are not naturally monogamous. This is particularly true when we're younger. In fact, you could argue that it is more natural for us to sow our wild oats when we're young. So, marriage in your youth is not ideal. But what about marriage when you're older? Well, there are similar problems. As we age, we might feel that life is passing us by and we're missing out on new experiences, and we may be tempted to have an affair and cheat on our partners. Number two, it is expensive and a waste of money. So, sure, you might save on your tax bill in the long run, but do you know how much the average wedding and honeymoon costs these days? In the UK, it's around 32,000, maybe more. And I'm adding that. Seeing what I've known. I mean, who has that sort of money for one day and a week's holiday? Of course, you could get married on a budget, but people will notice and comment. And with social media encouraging things like bride shaming and wedding cake shaming, do you really want to take the risk of putting a cheapy wedding together? So number three, half of the marriages, they end in divorce anyway. Do you know that only a few years ago, nearly 50% of all marriages in the US ended in divorce? This rate is dropping thanks to millennials who are marrying and staying married. But you might wonder to yourself, what is the point when so many marriages fail? Why spend all that money in the first place on something that doesn't have much chance of working out? So number four, marriage is bad for women's health. Overall, marriage is good for your health, however, not so much if you're a woman. So in the US, 55% of women wanted to end their marriages compared to just 29% of the men. But why do women feel unhappy once they are tied the knot? Men still traditionally earn more money than women, so they tend to wield more power in the relationship, and women also do more of the childbearing and child rearing, child care, and give up their careers to look after children. So as a result, they are reliant on their husbands for money. This leaves them powerless and feeling vulnerable. So even women who don't have children and do have careers still end up doing a majority of the household chores, and men will spend their leisure time on their hobbies and catching up with their friends. On the other hand, women will tidy the house and do the washing and fix the meals. If she asks hubby for some help, she's nagging him. Number five, marriage traps you. It's all well and good if you're happy and in a great relationship, but what about abusive marriages, such as domestic violence, coercive control, and are common in all kinds of situations. So however, once you're married, it is much more difficult to extract yourself from your spouse. Couples may argue about property or custody issues with their kids. Your spouse might oppose the divorce, and this can cost money going through solicitors and the courts. And what about the children's welfare? You might also stay in a bad marriage simply because you're married and you have kids. So it's old-fashioned. That's number six. Despite many young people getting hitched, marriage is seen to many as a traditional institution. Some even view it as a way of conforming to societal norms. Then there are others that think marriage should be available to everyone, including same-sex couples. On the other hand, you may argue, why should you get married to show your love to your partner? There are a lot of kinds of relationships these days that don't have a certificate to prove their love. Marriage isn't the only option for people these days. Number seven, you like being financially independent. So I wouldn't like to have a joint bank account with anyone, even if that person was my husband. So I have always taken care of my own finances, and I don't intend to give over half of my stuff to someone else just because of a bit of paper. That might sound pretty unromantic, but when you've worked hard all of your life and when you are a woman, you have to be careful. Then again, before you start judging me, I wouldn't expect a future husband to hand over half his stuff either. Number 8. It is more expensive to be married. Just as there are financial reasons to marry, so are financial reasons to not marry. It is correct to think that as a married couple you will be entitled to certain tax breaks, but be warned, there are also marriage tax penalties. It all depends on how much you both earn. You may find that if you both make a similar amount of money, you could risk a penalty. Couples tend to get a tax break when one earns significantly less than the other. Now, these are some things I wasn't even aware of, and I'm interjecting in this article. I was shocked. I'm learning myself as I'm viewing all of this. So I'm just as, new at this revelation as some of you are. So number 9, blended families. For those marrying when they are older, there's a chance that they will have children from previous marriages, and that it happens to be true. So it's also possible that you have your own kids to think about as well, so not to mention in-laws, uncles, aunts, and grandparents. Your partner may have financial obligations to a former relationship or spouse, and you may also lose some benefits should you enter into a new marriage. Then there's the problem of everyone getting along. That's a whole nother story. If the children do not like the new partner, this could put friction on the marriage. So I believe that is the whole article for that article in and of itself. So in summary, it says it's up to you whether you think it's better to marry or not to marry. There are advantages as well as disadvantages to both sides of the argument, but whatever you choose to do, I wish you all the best in the future. And if you enjoyed this article and found it helpful, please feel free to share it. So I guess I've shared it with you. That was one article that I found interesting, but it was more about what's happening today, and I wanted to interject some of what I've discovered is like I'm seeing lots of videos of people complaining that they don't really like being married or that their marriages are difficult. I've also seen videos where some people are dealing with domestic violence, and a lot more these days. And I'm also discovering, because of the political climate that we're under, some people's marriages are based on whether the person is Republican or Democrat and what their views are. And then some people are Republican or Democrat in the marriages, and they don't have the same ideologies and views, and they don't agree on everything. And sometimes that can be the deal breaker in a relationship, and I've learned that. And then there's other issues, financial problems that come up in marriages. So it isn't always an issue of somebody's cheating. It could have to do with money, and like as they said in this article, there could be financial disadvantages. And those are some things I don't think people consider when they get in relationships, and that can put a strain on the marriage. That could even cause the fighting to happen. So this right here says, can a marriage divided by politics be saved? So politics can play a part in people's relationships. And also what marriage used to be like. So it says what to do when political differences threaten marital harmony. So think about what just happened, There was all the talk about Charlie Kirk. There's been a lot of talk about, politics in the media, a lot of talks about voting, women's rights, and I think that plays a big role now today as to why there's such a big, huge drop in marriage. And I've been hearing some other stories that don't sound so great and they don't make people encouraged. And I believe that's the reason why now you have a group of folks trying to pressure people to go back to the old traditional ways. But if you look at what's going on, I don't think people are buying it. Well, there's a large percentage that aren't that excited about it. So an estimated 30% of couples are in relationships where political views are not shared, and a four-step approach can ease political tensions and help couples navigate current events without conflict, and using general prompts about values and your relationship can help jumpstart the conversation. So this is a whole nother article that I saw. I'm not going to really get into it, but I heard that this plays a part in whether it makes the marriage or breaks the marriage. And I'm going to jump over here. I saw this article too. This article, I believe, talks about society and how marriage is viewed. And I saw an article where they were talking about back in time, when traditional marriage was the thing to do. They even got percentages. I think this was fairly recent, this article right here. So it says marriage decline threatens America's social and economic future. All the lonely people, where do they all come from? And so this was not very long ago. This was fairly recent. This was February 10th, 2025. So this is by Don Feder, and it's an opinion piece. So it talks about, it's more an opinion piece. So you gotta also look at who, or where some of these things are coming from. Then I saw this right here, prenuptial. It was kind of posted, so I looked it up. I wanted to view it, and so I'm gonna pull it up. I was like looking at it because I've heard people talking on a forum called Quora, and they were talking about prenuptials. And it was a man. He was saying, "Oh, I'm getting a prenuptial. If I get married, I'm getting a prenuptial, and they have to sign it first before we get married, because if they don't sign it, then I'm not getting married." So I was looking at. I live in the state of California, so you have to also consider what state you live in and what their rules are based upon unions and marriages, because every state is different as well, and the laws are slightly different. So California prenuptial agreement. So it says the parties, this prenuptial agreement made this day, blah, 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 is to create, I said concrete, set in stone, to create a premarital agreement. That's what a prenuptial is. Between the following, the husband's name, the wife's name goes here. So in terms, the husband and the wife do not correlate with the person's gender, are solely used to identify the individual in this agreement. And when mentioned, and then it says in a singular version, husband and wife shall be known as spouse, and when mentioned together, the husband and wife shall be known as a couple. So the grounds for divorce, let's see what the grounds for divorce are. This agreement shall remain in effect only in the grounds for divorce are due the following. Check all that apply. Irreconcilable differences. So I've heard famous people, when they split up, it's always irreconcilable differences. So I'm like, what is that? What is irreconcilable differences? So it says irretrievable breakdown of the marriage and incompatibility of temperament led to the irremediable breakdown of the marriage with no possibility of reconciliation. So they just couldn't agree, and something was happening in that relationship, and they just came to the agreement that they should no longer be together. That's what it sounds like to me. Adultery, husband, wife, either spouse, prison sentence, more than blah blah years, suspended or not suspended, alcoholism, substance abuse, addiction, and any other legal or illegal substance, and then that box other, whatever that would mean. The term divorce shall refer to the dissolution of the marriage between the couple. A divorce is certified through the judgment decree or similar document that validates the dissolution of marriage in the jurisdiction of the governing law. Engagement period. So during the engagement period, this is when this paper is signed. So according to what I'm seeing here, so this agreement shall be valid for blah 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 a specified period of time. So you got a period of time. So let's say you're engaged and you're about to be married. This is going to happen before you get married, and y'all have to sit down and talk about this and agree to this. So then let's say you break the engagement off. If you break the engagement off, this whole document becomes void because you're no longer entering into the marriage. So it doesn't apply to either one of you. So it's only one page, but I think this is what people use, and maybe they may add or they may modify it however they see fit. This right here could be the deal breaker. You might be already ready to not even engage in that marriage even before it starts when you see this paper coming at you, because that might make somebody turned off, or they might be okay with it. What's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. It could be a financial agreement or disagreement between the two. So I believe that's where this whole thing comes in at. So there's a lot to consider, and I don't think people think about these things, and I didn't even really know myself that this was a thing. And then I started looking at why marriage is suddenly so much a political issue. Why is the pundit class suddenly so marriage obsessed? So we convened a roundtable of experts on the history of marriage to talk about why it is becoming so politically charged. Well, it's kind of like what I was telling you guys about marriage. Marriage equality was a thing and still is, and now they're attacking that. And so there's some changes. I heard that they might attack interracial couples, they might attack alternative couples, people who are LGBTQ couples, and so on. All these other relationships might be attacked under this political climate. And then women's rights was a hot button topic. Women not having the right to have the choice of over their bodies, and I'm hearing issue with name changing could even affect women being able to vote if they're in a marriage, or what they're going to do in their marriage. So what was sounding to me like, we always talk about the issues and the ills of slavery. It sounds like marriage will become a trap for some women, if not most. And it could be like a small version of slavery for some, especially if you're in a really poor, difficult marriage. So that might be an issue for a lot of people, and that might be a turnoff, and that could be also a deal breaker. Now, this thing came out last year, but it came out like the early part of last year. So they already foresaw this. Is by a Joanna Wise. It was a writer in Boston who contributed to this. So marriage is, at least in the U.S., isn't what it used to be. So over the past 50 years, marriage rates nationwide, they've declined by 60%. 40% of the U.S. children are now born in unmarried mothers, twice as many as in 1980. So one widely covered poll last year found that 2 out of 5 Gen Zers and millennials considered marriage an outdated concept. So such stats have inspired a volley of columns, blogs, posts, think pieces, and books arguing why we should or shouldn't care. The decline of marriage, after all, joins other social changes such as the falling birth rates, the loneliness epidemic as they call it, and the new crusade for Surgeon General Vivek Murthy that arguably could be solved by more marriages, is what they say. So conservatives broadly have preached to the return of the tradition. That could be another reason why some people are turned off by it, because looking at what's going on right now, some people are not that crazy about all of this, because, people losing jobs. This is in 2025. A lot of people lost jobs. People are losing jobs all the way from the top. And then there's job cutting. There's budget cutting that's affecting some of the people that are in the lower end jobs. It's like that trickle down effect, but in the negative sense. Then you have healthcare cuts. Then you have program cuts. Then you have them going after funding for schools and pulling funding from special education, pulling funding from colleges, pulling funding from homeless shelters, pulling funding from the homeless fund, pulling funding from other institutions. Just tend to make social ills even worse than what they already are. Viewing it shows that this whole concept of marriage is becoming a lot more grimmer, and people are starting to not really be as jazzed about it. I say this: some people might be cool with marriage and they might do well, and then there's a lot more of them. Maybe it's not a thing that they want to pursue. And when it's coupled with all of these other social issues and then financial issues and all of the things that are layered in, that may make people turned off by the whole thing altogether. So conservatives, they broadly have preached to return to it. However, the New York Times' David Brooks advised younger readers to obsess less about your career and to think a lot more about marriage. So they've been trying to pressure people to try to go back to traditional ways. But how can you? I mean, this is a new era, new people, new generation. So people are choosing peace. Now I'm going to add a little bit in here. What I also been seeing in videos is people saying that the HIV epidemic is skyrocketing again. People are not being truthful about their sexual histories. They're not being transparent. So if you can't be honest and you're not even married, I don't think this is going to be a thing that people are going to want to enter into if you can't get honesty out of people who you're not even in a union with to begin with. You're just dating them and you're getting abuse, you're getting lies, you're getting people cheating on you and they haven't even committed. So I'm thinking that this might not work out too tough on a lot of people. So that's my opinion on that. I mean, I feel like some people can maybe do marriage, and then there's others that they're just turned off by it. They see it as another institution. And what I've learned over the years is that it looks like it's more like a contract and it benefits people. It's not about love anymore. And so, whatever benefits you, it's almost like voting. You're voting for the lesser of the two evils. Both of them have issues. So, you're trying to figure out which one will benefit you. So, that's what it seems to be. And with marriage, it seems like it's almost similar. So they get into politics in marriage. So look, if you listen to this, it says liberals, meanwhile, have often argued that society's problems are too deep to be fixed with the wedding ban. And that's kind of how I sounded. And think about it. Look at what's going on. You think getting married is going to solve all of the issues that we're dealing with? I don't think so. So in the New York Magazine, Rebecca Traister, she pushed back against scholars and politicians who have routinely imposed marriage. Okay. So as it were, a smooth, indistinct entity as a cure for the inequity and dissatisfaction, the loneliness that plague this nation. But the opinions haven't always shaken down along the usual partisan lines. University of Maryland economics professor Melissa Kearney made the case for marriage to her fellow liberals in her widely discussed book, The Two-Parent Privilege. Okay, so how Americans, they stopped getting married and started falling behind. This is still so wrenching to discuss, wrote Times columnist Nicholas Kristof in a column that essentially agreed with Kearney's point that liberals should be concerned about the collapse of the traditional marriage. So they argue back and forth that what is the issues? What are the issues? So why is marriage conversation so challenging? And maybe because it touches on economic policy, racial history, cultural wars, long-term effects of the feminist revolution, and the intimate contours of everyday life. So Political magazine wanted to explore all those dynamics with a group of marriage experts. So these, I guess, are people who are therapists and whatnot. So they hashed it back and forth about issues. And so to make this go into detail, they started talking about all of the things that happen when people get married. They think this institution itself has magical properties, or it is raising children, and if properly supported, families of any variety can offer the same or be offered the same advantages. So the following conversation has been edited, of course, and condensed for clarity. So when they go deeper in this, they start mentioning how people's different backgrounds could play a part into it. Culture, race, maybe alternative marriages, people's rights, like women's rights. I don't think people consider these things when they get into these unions. They don't think about all of the other things that you got to consider when you get in these relationships. And then domestic violence is still an issue. I saw a lot of videos coming up. I don't know what's going on in this world, but when it comes to these unions, but I'm seeing a lot more domestic violence being an issue. And that seems to be one of the main issues in a lot of these relationships as to why a lot of these women don't want to be in these unions. It's not even just the cheating, it's being beat up, being locked in the house, treated like you're the kid, or you're not just physical abuse but emotional abuse. It's really depressing, some of the stuff that women are saying they're experiencing in these relationships. And on the outside they seem like just the perfect happy couple, but behind closed doors you're hearing about a lot of problems. And then there's contributors that trigger the violence in these marriages. And look at what's happening right now. A lot of job loss, a lot of budget cutting, people losing health care. The stability, the financial stability is not what it once was. And so people would marry, you're thinking two incomes are better than one. Now, this I mean, you can have a laundry list of some of the things that are going on right now that could affect even people that are by themselves, let alone in a relationship. So I was really like looking at it, it's talking about. I want to start with you, Stephanie, since you're the marriage historian. Over the past couple of centuries, marriage has evolved from pretty purely an economic institution to a social institution, a cultural institution, a theoretical joining of soulmates with all that implies. How has it changed in the U.S. in the last 50 years and in the last 10 years? So, Stephanie Newts, marriage used to be the only game in town, so you could not get access to legal rights without marriage. Most women could not support themselves outside of marriage, so most men could not work a full job and get their meals made and their house cleaned, and any children they had raised outside of the marriage were not protected. So this is a Harvard historian. So Nancy Cott once made a really interesting analogy. What we saw over the last 100 years is that disestablishment of marriage as an institution, the same way we saw the disestablishment of the Church of England. So some of the decline in marriage is absolutely inevitable, completely irreversible. So some, however, is occurring because it's harder and harder to build a marriage. And many marriages that people can enter don't look like they're going to deliver the goods and the solace that we expect. So this is wise. I'd rather hear each of you make the case for the value of marriage, if it does, in this moment, have inherent value. Let's start with you, Brad. So Brad Wilcox, marriage grounds, guides family, and gives direction and structure and normative guidance to adult couples who are trying to forge an intimate relationship with one another over the course of their lives. Wise. Who else wants to chime in? So Kay Humwitz. I do. I think you need to keep in mind that marriage is a universal. That is, every society has had marriage, bar one, maybe two, rare exceptions. Why is that? There are a number of reasons, but one of them is the rearing of children. The collective human brain usually basically come up with this one institution. So it doesn't look like the nuclear family everywhere, but there's always some way that the family is defined and becomes part of the life script of young people. So DeAndre Williams, there's a two-pronged issue for me personally as a scholar. First, countering the assumption that marriage is an inequality reducing mechanism, and second, this historicizing marriage as universal. It doesn't look that way for people who are racialized as black in this country. There are variations on who can enter and what are the returns of the marriage across the population. Wise. Matt, I want to hear your case for marriage. Brat, it's I guess it's Matt Brunig. I don't know that I have prepared a case exactly, but there are sometimes very incomplete and frankly lazy arguments that people make about marriage where they don't distinguish between high quality marriages and low quality marriages, and that can generate a lot of mistaken policy conclusions. That's what I've mostly been writing about with the respect of Melissa Kearney's book. So as far as my stance on marriage in general, we live in a pluralistic society. Let 1,000 flowers bloom on different approaches to life. So Wise. Brad, I gather you disagree. So they're talking back and forth about the different issues of marriage. So the subtle of The subtitle of your upcoming book throws down a cultural gauntlet. Defying elites, forge strong families, and save civilization. So, what's your response to Matt? Why shouldn't a thousand flowers bloom? So Wilcox, he says, I think this idea of embracing family diversity, what I think, Matt, is that suggesting it is very adult centered, progressive take on things. So there's just no question that in the US, at least, there is no comparison to marriage in delivering stability for kids and giving them maximal access to their parents' attention and affection, discipline, and money. So, Brunig, some marriages can increase stability for children, some marriages can reduce stability for children. So, it depends on the particular couple and what problems they may or may not have. So, we all know that people who are very unstable adults, who may be abusive, who may have drug issues, who may have consumption problems, vices, and various sorts, 78% of kids are in cohabiting families. So the real question of the policy perspective is how many of those 22% of other kids would really be better off if their particular parents were married. Okay? So Wise, DeAndre, I see you are nodding, so I want to see what you have to say and also bring in a little bit of policy. So Kearney's book seems to support a common conservative argument. So that the Great Society and other anti-poverty programs created disincentives to marriage, and even liberals should be pushing harder for the opposite. So Williams, I think it's cruel to say that marriage has some type of power rather than the individuals who make that marriage possible. So there's this idea that one person could be poor, meet someone else that is poor, and then once they say I do, all of a sudden there's some abracadabra magic economic success and the child well-being success. So we have created policies under the assumption that marriage has these benefits. But there is a big caveat in the statement. When you place an emphasis on marriage as an institution, it creates the illusion that marriage has inherent magical powers. And I have a hard time grappling with that. So Wise, a lot of writing I have seen lately about marriage, whether it's describing disadvantaged people or elites, focuses on women who have trouble finding marriageable men. And a lot of advice people give about finding a partner who to the heart of what we're talking about, generalized arguments versus individualized situations. So how picky should people be if they think marriage is of value? Stephanie, do you want to take that question? News. So some people say that marriage has become a luxury good. So it's the capstone. It is what you do when you've gotten everything in gear. So I've come to think that marriage is analogous to the high stakes real estate deal, with well-being along to with wealth, feelings as well as finances on the line. It can contribute tremendous benefits if you have substantial down payment to make, both in terms of your financial security and your personal maturity. And if you keep up the emotional and financial maintenance fees that marriage nowadays requires when there are other options we've talked about. So marriage is harder to get in and to stay in, and not everybody's going to be able to do this. And I totally agree with Matt. The overwhelming evidence from psychologists that study these issues show that bad marriages, unstable marriages, are often much worse for kids than stable single parents and persons and families. So now Kearney will tell you that it's because single parent families can never make quite enough money But my God, we spent hundreds of millions of dollars promoting marriage, and to the null effect. Maybe we should spend it giving families the money they need to raise their children in secure ways. Wise, Brad and Kay, what do you say? What if you don't have the down payment for a stable marriage? Humowitz. I'm going to speak up for marriage as a social institution and not for the individuals. Social institutions, when they're working well and they're designed properly, have the effect of molding individuals in ways that are often very positive. So New York Times ran a piece recently that got a lot of attention. It was called "Why Aren't More People Marrying?" Ask women what dating is like. So it started with the story of a woman who was with a boyfriend for some time and got pregnant, and then he disappeared. But then it says that he had been having a drug problem recently and he had lost 4 jobs. And I'm thinking, why? Why would you be with a guy like that? We have an institution that helps guys like that be more responsible. So if the guy is growing up in a world where he's not going to get access to a woman like he did because he's a jerk, then he's going to have a change in his behavior. So, in other words, the institution shapes people, so it molds people for a future. And I think that our current, more laissez faire approach is leaving a lot of young people lost about how to think about their futures. So, it has been a disaster for boys in particular because they are basically being told it doesn't matter whether a child has a father or not. And you, as a grown up, don't really have to worry about being a father and a husband because it's all up in the air. Wilcox, and empirical evidence is important to bring in here. DeAndrick was questioning this idea that there's something magical about marriage per se as in an institution, and yet we are actually have pretty powerful evidence from met economics professor Jonathan Gruber talking about the shift from fault-based divorce to no-fault divorce, which is the thing, no-fault divorce. And I've heard that being said, and that shift was linked to some major negative effects on kids. So we have studies from India and UVA looking at how divorce is linked to bad outcomes for kids, even controlling for genetics factors. So we have a study in Minnesota looking at twin men and finding that the twins got married earned 26% more. The twins that got married, they earned 26% more. And so I want to suggest that there actually is some institutional magic about marriage. So it's back and forth. I'm kind of stopping. It's long, it's lengthy. But these people are, I guess, philosophers. But notice, I will say this. It sounds like a lot of them are not really talking about the different cultures. It was brought up very briefly in this, so they're making that you have some people making the case for why marriage is not just the institution alone. They're saying that it's a good thing and that it somehow magically will make things better for men, but you notice they leave out how women are feeling in all of this. And you know what I've been seeing on the videos is that a lot of women say it's not benefiting them and they're not wanting to be in these marriages. And I've also been seeing men saying they don't even like their wives. So what's up with all of that? And these are young people, and these are young people that are not too young to be married, but young people that you would think would be vibrant and ready for, build a family and a future and have marriages and whatnot. And they're not really that happy. They're not happy in these unions. And I know what some people might say, because you got some people, they just want marriage to be a thing. There are people like that. So I'm just gonna share to you, and I just went through this. I'm not gonna finish the whole thing because it's lengthy, but I thought it was interesting because I've been seeing a lot coming up about how marriage is declining and how political people are trying to push people into the idea of trying to bring back the traditional institution of marriage. And then I'm seeing people saying that marriage is not something that they want to enter in because now all of it is becoming so political that is bringing the fervor and the momentum of people wanting to get married, and this time bringing it down. And women's rights, I think, play a part in that because already what I was hearing in a lot of these videos is that the marriages actually benefit the men than they do the women, and the women actually suffer in some of these marriages. And then I'm hearing that men don't even like their wives, or they're bored, or they want to have other relationships outside the marriage, and it just goes down a rabbit hole. So what do you think about this? This is what I've been hearing, this is what I've been seeing, and it's happening more and more. Look at the articles coming out. Political divides cut through marriages and families in run up to the 2024. That was in 2024. See, this was what was happening then. But now, even in 2025, it even seems more worse. They have people talking about the pros and cons, and I went over you the pros and cons. This is talking about how politics are getting involved in the marriages. It's becoming political because women are losing their rights. And so I think that has a lot to do. And it's not just women losing their rights. Didn't you remember that when they had the equality, everyone who loves someone should be married and all that? So LGBTQ, they're threatening to change that whole thing around and no longer recognize those as marriages. So that is also going to bring that whole thing down, and I'm hearing, this is sad, I have to mention this, but they're talking about even attacking interracial couples. You remember there was a time where there was a story about an interracial couple and they had to fight to be married and be together, and there was a big story behind it, and there was so much pushback. They felt like certain people of certain backgrounds shouldn't be married together. It's really sad, folks. I think that's really bringing that whole thing down, and people are starting to look outside the box now. They're saying, hey, this was all not really what they thought it was, and it is really just an institution, and it's a piece of paper. And like I said in that other article previous, where people were saying, if I really love somebody, why do I have a piece of paper to prove it? And so remember I shared with you the pros and the cons. I'm feeling like some people do it because it's a contract, a binding legal contract between two people, and you do it based on the benefits of that contract. And so what if you're in that legal contract with somebody that does things to you and make you feel trapped? What if before you get in a union, the person presents to you a prenup and they don't want to share their money with you and you don't want to share your money with them? Should you even be thinking about being together? Because maybe that is the deal breaker. Then it mentioned about in-laws, uncles, grandparents. Some people say they get divorced because of cheating and because of drama. But drama could also be in-laws. I don't think people think about any of these things. And then there's politics. There used to be a time people would go out and meet people face to face. You knew what you was seeing and you knew what you was attracted to. Now people meet online and on apps. It's dangerous. People don't tell the truth. STDs are skyrocketing. People show you pictures of people that don't even look like them, or they show you pictures of what they used to look like, and then when you meet them, they don't even look like that anymore. And then it's not even the looks. You find out the person is not telling you about maybe their history. They could be violent. They might be a murderer. Maybe they're not telling you the truth if they are employed or not employed. They might be looking to lay up with you, and you marry them. Now you're stuck with them and you find out they're not productive. They don't work, and you're taking care of them like another child. So there's a lot of things that could happen in those relationships that could be the deal breaker to your relationship. So what do you think about that? I mean, wow, that I didn't even realize that, when I started looking at it. And then I moved over to this article and I started looking at the idea, what are financial disadvantages to marrying later in life? Oh my God, to overcome them. So you're already older, you're set in your ways, you're financially stable, or maybe you're not as stable as you want to be, but you're doing all right. And here comes somebody and they want to give you more problems. And it is in the form of money. Maybe they had previous relationships. I heard that if you get married to somebody that owes child support, and if you marry them, they could come after you, even though you weren't even involved in any of that. Now, I don't know. Tell me if I'm wrong. I don't know. I heard that. I said, wow. Anybody remember Halle Berry, the famous actress? She was married to Eric Benet, and I guess they were in a union, and he had a daughter from a previous relationship. And then when they divorced, he filed for child support, and she owes child support for that child, even though the child biologically is not hers, because she was in that relationship and she vowed to be the kid's acting parent. When they separated, he filed for child support and spousal support for that kid. And I think he won. I don't know how that goes, but there's been other relationships. Even if you look at some of these famous couples, can be somewhat of an example of some of the things that I've never even seen this before until you read about it and you're like, wow. I don't think people think about any of this. I've heard stories, even people who aren't famous, they get married to somebody and they don't know how many kids they've had in the past, and they owe child support, and they lay that in your lap. So that might have been why they married you, because they couldn't pay for it, and they expect you with your good job to pay for it. So ladies, better find out who you with before you get involved. I mean, there's so many layers to getting in a relationship. Then you know it ain't just about looks on the outside. And I don't know if this is still a thing, but people will also judge you by your credit score. Can you believe that? Let me see what her credit score or his credit score is. It's usually the man. What is his credit score? Sometimes the woman. What is your political affiliation? Before they get involved with you, your race. That could play a part. Money. Do they have any money? There's a such thing called marrying up. That's another thing. Some people, they don't really just want to marry you because they fell in love with you. They want to marry you because they fell in love with your wallet. Yes, that happens. I mean, it's just so much involved, and I don't think people even really begin this. We haven't even scratched the surface. Why it matters. You see this? Marrying and later in life has its disadvantages, such as emotional maturity and financial stability. However, it can also present significant financial challenges that may impact retirement, estate planning, tax benefits, and it goes on down the list. I'm not even going to go down it. You see these articles. I mean, it's Oh my gosh, I didn't even really consider, and this is recent. This is February 26, 2025. This is by Mike Dusombre, and he's an older gentleman that talks about all of these issues that come up when people marry later, and you hear them stories about, oh, maybe you'll meet your mate later in life. Hey, maybe you'll meet your financial problems and headaches later in life. Those are some things to consider. Okay, not to be negative, Nancy, but come on. Some people might meet people and it might be great. However, I'm just to remind you, some of the things that we looking at, what's going on right now, ain't so great in these unions. From where I'm sitting, what I'm seeing, especially, I think politics plays a big role in all of this. I think that is the deal breaker. Trust me, I'm telling you, it just seems like that's the deal breaker. So think about it. What do you think? I mean, have you been married, divorced? Did you feel better when you got divorced than when you got married? Did you feel better being married? Do you feel like your marriage is exhausting and you want out of the marriage? You didn't know that it was going to be this much responsibility. Do you feel like you're married but you're alone? I've heard stories where people get married and they're more lonely with their mate than they were when they were single. Wow, that is crazy. And it can happen. You can be with somebody and be more lonely. So anyway, enough of that. We shall see. But I think there's going to be some laws that is going to change how people view marriage very, very soon. And it has already kind of started.